Recording has started.
Cheryl, you're on mute.
I have 507, Chair Neighbors. Would you like to introduce the meeting?
No, you go ahead, thanks.
This is Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Rules Committee. This is, the date is June 14, 2022. I will read the remote access to information and participation. In accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N3320, declaring a state of emergency regarding the COVID-19 outbreak, and Mayor London and Breed's proclamation declaring a local emergency issued on February 25, 2020, including the guidance for gatherings issued by the San Francisco Department of Public Health Officer, aggressive directives were issued to reduce the spread of COVID-19. On March 17, 2020, the Board of Supervisors authorized their board and committee meetings to convene remotely, via Microsoft Teams, and will allow remote public comment via teleconference. Members of the public may participate by phone or may submit their comments by email to cheryl.leger@sfgov.org. That's CHERYL.LEGER@sfgov.org. All comments received will be made a part of the official record. Sunshine Ordinance Task Force agendas and their associated documents are available at sfbos.org/sunshine. As the COVID-19 disease progresses, please visit the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force website regularly to be updated on the current situation as it affects the legislative process. Chair Neighbors, do you want to read meeting decorum?
No, you go ahead and do that, thanks.
Meeting decorum. Any member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force may call for decorum due to disorderly conduct of meeting participants. Persons who engage in threatening and/or menacing behavior may be asked to leave. Shall I read item number 1?
Yeah, that would be great, thanks.
Item number 1, call to order, roll call, and agenda changes. Roll call. Member Highland?
Aye.
Member Highland present. Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein present. Chair Neighbors?
Present.
Chair Neighbors present. We have a quorum. I am unaware of any agenda changes. Committee members, are you aware of any agenda changes?
No.
Member Highland?
Nope.
Chair Neighbors?
Nope, no agenda changes.
Okay. All right. Shall I read item number 2?
Yes.
Item number 2, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda.
So let's see. Do we have anyone who's interested in making general public comment? And just as a reminder, to make public comment, you can, if you're on the app, you can raise your hand. If you're calling in, you can press *3 to raise your hand. And then we'll know you're interested in making public comment. Any takers on that, Mr. Young?
Excuse me, Mr. Young, do we have any public commenters?
Yes, if you'd like to make public comment, please raise your hand using the raise your hand option on the WebEx program. They have not raised their hand, so I do not believe they want to make comment at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Young. I just wanted also to make a quick announcement that this is our first Rules Committee in quite some time, since September 24th, 2019. And we have a new committee here, not Member Highland. He's been around forever, since the dinosaurs, and has been probably chaired this committee a million times, but We're glad he's here to be our sage. And then myself and members Stein, who we may have lost again. Oh, she's there.
Oh, I see.
Yes,
Yep.
there she is. We are new. So I thought for our benefit, I would just remind us of the Rules Committee description, which is the Rules Committee shall review matters related to amendments to the task force bylaws and procedures for task force meetings, and shall assist the chair of the task force to ensure that all annual objectives enumerated in the Sunshine Ordinance are met by the task force. In addition, the Rules Committee shall schedule hearings on complaints to review jurisdiction and the merits of the complaint in order to provide recommendations to the full task force. So that's what we're doing here. And are we ready to then move on to item 3? Shell, could you read item 3 for us?
Yes. Item number 3, file number 22063, review and possible amendments to pilot respondents packet instructions and letter.
So let me provide a little introduction of this one too, make sure we're clear. Member Highland had mentioned that he wanted to make sure Member Stein was here because this was her baby. But I think that Member Stein and I had this baby together a little bit.
My apologies.
Yes, it's our baby. Just as the background in this, we both were working at, I was working on a respondents form revision, and based on actually a suggestion from a member of the public. And at the same time, unbeknownst to me, Member Stein was working on complaint process revisions. And so we came together and I said, let me take that respondents piece out of it and work on that. And she continued to work on the rest of the package with it, I believe, within the context of the Education Outreach and Training Committee, are mostly on your own.
Yeah, I did put it through complaints before it went to the full task force because I was told that was the process, but I don't think in retrospect that had to be the process, but it was on my own. Then it went through complaints and then here.
Which brings us to the reason this item is with us today, because I got different information about what the process was to be. And it has been confusing, and then to make matters even more confusing, I convinced the board to vote this in as a pilot, for which there is no process established as far as I understand. So what we've got here is an item that we need to revisit within the context of at least that Member Stein's been shepherding this other part of the process through a subcommittee, but it sounds like we're kind of terra incognita because we've adopted this change in instructing respondents as a pilot for this form, but we don't, as far as I can tell, have any standard operating procedures for dealing with pilots. I thought Member Highland or Mr. Young might have some background on that. So that's kind of the bit of background, and also just determining scope. So is it within our scope to review the respondents' packet materials and the related pilot process in light of our Rules Committee attention to the bylaws and standard operating procedures of the SOTF, or is it more appropriate to recommend another action? Yes, Member Highland.
So Member Highland here. So I guess before we get to unwrapping that, let me just make sure I understand everything. And after your excellent summary, I think I do. So it sounds like there's 3 moving parts here: the petitioners package, the respondents package, and then Member Stein's ancillary or related changes to the overall procedure. Is that how I'm reading it?
That's correct representation of the respondents pilot and form with the materials. Mm-hmm. Does that also capture your contributions, Member Stein? As the
Sorry,
separate
I muted temporarily because I'm always taking notes and I know it bugs people. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this item number, and I did see that the public complaint procedure was in there, and that was a piece that I partially rewrote with the goal in mind of just trying to streamline and make more relevant the information that we were getting, and also trying to streamline the packets of information that we were getting a little bit. I was going to say that this complaint procedure that is in this item number is the old one, not the new one that was approved. And last I checked, the new one that was approved was still not up, even though it was approved, I think, back in December. So that piece of it in this item was my revision, but my revision doesn't appear in this item.
And then
The rest of it was Lori's initiative, but I did work on it as well, exactly, because I was already working on it separately, and then I saw she was working on it, so she took that piece.
Okay.
And just as another piece of information, Member Highland, I think the last meeting we were going to look at it again. I was sick and had to leave early. And the meeting before that was the meeting in which we looked particularly at the letter, the cover letter that was going out with the respondents packet. We made some changes. That letter is not included in these packet materials, but we can check in with Ms. Leger to make sure that that letter has been going out as well. I think that's where we made those changes, and then we looked at the responses, and I think at least Member Stein and I felt pretty positive that we were getting almost like a 50-50. Some folks were actually trying to follow the instructions, even without any real framing or education or, any kind of, letter out to everyone saying, here's the new form. And so we're continuing on, but we don't have any kind of indicator of what the end of this process looks like.
Okay, so let me take another stab at understanding. So the petitioner pilot or I guess template, I remember seeing that come through committee, and I think we voted on it, and I think we're using that. Is that correct? That you guys worked on, or Member Stein worked on? Is that one in play or not yet?
Are you talking about the affirmation letters?
Nope. I'm talking about the petitioner's records request form, because we got a petitioner and we got a respondent, right?
Right. Sorry, I'm thinking of them as complainant, but yes.
Okay. We'll use that
Yes.
term.
What is here is just the rewritten, what's in this right now is the rewritten complaint procedure. Is the complaint procedure, which I rewrote a little bit, but this is the old one, not the new one. But that's not subject to the pilot. That was just, we approved those changes and they're supposed to be made. I submitted all the corrected PDFs, but for some reason the changes are still not made. And I don't know, I should ask here what that process is, because I don't know what else I can do to facilitate it, or what the holdup is to getting the revised documents up.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. I think, so I'm still seeing three different things. And I think the answer to Laura's question is, I think we can and should handle all of them, get them apples to apples in our committee, and then maybe even present them all together to the full task force. So what we're looking at today is just the respondents piece, correct? One of those three things, right?
That's what I thought, because that's the item number.
Right.
The public complaint procedure is in there, and I'm not sure why.
Okay. Well, this is, we've had this issue before with our documents being conflated with other documents, and so I think that's the first thing we have to sort out, because that's the agenda. On the agenda, the title is this, and that's really all we should address, I think.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. And
okay.
I just want to say, at least for my piece that I worked on, I don't want it to go before the full board again. It's gone before the full board. They've voted on it. It should be just happen. It just needs to be implemented.
Right. And you're talking about the complainants piece there, or the procedures?
I'm talking about the procedures.
Okay, because
what are you saying is the complainants piece?
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Respondent packet.
Hold on, hold on, guys. Shush. So I just want to make sure I think there's three different things here. The complainants intake form, if you like, right? The respondents intake form or guidance, and then the overall procedures, which
right.
covers both, I'm guessing.
Right.
Is that correct?
I'm just looking, where is the complainants form? Respondents packet. What page is the complainants form on?
It's not, it shouldn't be on here. I'm just trying to get.
Yeah, I don't think it is on here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the history. I'm trying to catch up with the history of where we are. So
Yeah, I think it's correct that we should just focus on the respondents piece here
right.
and ignore the other thing for now, unless you have a different idea, Lori, because that just needs to be implemented. Like, there's nothing to review there.
Okay, so that
As long as we are sure, as the Rules Committee, that all, I mean, I think what is important about looking at all of the documents together is to ensure continuity among the documents and to ensure continuity with the bylaws, right? So I think there is a separate issue of, can we move the respondents' instructions forward? What does that look like? How does it happen? It needs the full task force. And then to ensure for implementation that everything is aligned. That would be and I know that you've been working on that as you go along, but every time you add a piece, I think you've got to recheck alignment, right?
Yeah, and when I read through this item, looking at the respondents packet and then looking at the complaint procedures, I didn't see anything that was out of alignment. Maybe other people did, but I didn't.
okay.
Okay.
So again, just to make sure that we're clear, the complainants package which preceded this in terms of how it moved through committee, right? Where are we with that? Has that been implemented on, has been voted on by the full task force, and is it in use? I think the answer is yes. Maybe Miss Leger or Mr. Young can chime in on that. That's what I'm trying to get my finger on, because however that went through, we should probably follow this piece, the same channel, right? But if that hasn't, am I confusing you, Member Stein?
Yeah, you are confusing me. I'm trying to go back and look at, I didn't think of it as a complainants packet,
No.
what I did. So I wasn't thinking of it
No.
as giving instructions to the complainant. All I did was rewrite the procedures a little bit as we stated them, to make them a little bit more clear for the complainant and to try to streamline some of the information that we were getting. And then it was mostly about reorganizing the packets, but that comes from our end, not from the petitioner's end. So I wasn't doing anything that was directly aimed at, here's information that we're going to send out to the petitioners.
Okay, because I thought we did something, at least for us, for SOTF, so that when a complainant comes to us and starts to fill out what will eventually end up as an item on our agenda, they're going through the steps of what they have to fill out, the timelines and all that kind of stuff. I know I've seen something like that.
Yeah, we did do something like that. I don't think that came directly from me. I made comments on it, but it came from someone else. And Cheryl could probably speak to this, but there is a new form that's gone up online for the petitioners to fill out that I think reflects that document, but that document wasn't authored by me, although I was working on something adjacent. And so when I saw that document, I'm like, oh, here's all my feedback, because I had also been thinking about it a little bit.
Got it. Okay, so I'm just trying to.
Okay, just to clarify,
Makes sense.
Laura, I got a document. I have a document that I want our IT department to upload, which progresses every time you're done with a question. It goes down, 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 and then you have a submit. You have a next button, and that goes to the next page. And there are more questions for the petitioner to respond to. And at the bottom of the very last page is a submit button, and then it comes to me.
Yeah, that's like an online complaint form, right? You shared that with me, so I saw that, the draft form, and also gave feedback on that. But I'm just saying, I didn't make that original proposal. Some came from somewhere else, and I just gave feedback on it, I thought.
Okay. But it sounds, Cheryl, that's just about to be implemented. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
I'm going to be in the office on Thursday, and I will talk to my IT person Thursday morning to see if they can get this thing up.
No, it's okay. No rush. I just wanted to know where that was. That was what I was
Where it
trying to get my
is.
finger on. I think now I have my finger on that. And I'm guessing all those changes to that, to the work that ended up on that, ultimately on this electronic form, went through committees, full task force,
Did.
done and dusted.
Yeah,
Great. Okay.
it did. It just, it had to be formatted so that it could be uploaded onto our webpage and be active for somebody to make whatever statements they want.
And
Great.
that brings us back to our original question of this orphaned piece of the puzzle that hasn't gone on through a subcommittee, that shouldn't be any single member's, work. And fortunately, Member Stein and I worked on the early version of it, but I think it would be a stronger document and probably more defensible if a subcommittee or some kind of group were able to work on it, to finalize it, to move it through the last, its kind of last leg.
So back to your original question, Chair Neighbors, I think, and Victor, chime in here if you disagree, I think we can do that legwork and we can present it back to the full task force as here's the second piece, and as reference, here was the complainant's piece that we've already stamped as a full committee, and both of them relate to the overall procedures thusly, and that could be at the bottom of this material. That might be a nice way of presenting it all. And now at the full task force, of course, if they want to make any edits or whatever, they'll do that. It'll come back to the full task force and they'll do the final rubber stamp, and then it's policy, right?
I'm just not sure, this is Member Stein, I'm just not sure that we need to put the complainants piece through the board again. I mean, that's kind of, we already looked at it, we made the decisions about it.
Well, time out. You're confusing me with your terms now. The complainant piece is what exactly to you?
The petitioner's piece. I thought you were referring to the okay. So what?
That's done.
Okay.
So I think when we present the respondent packet, what we're looking at, this item here, that we can present to the full board, and we can also present the other piece that you're working on here at the bottom on page 8, which is the overall public complaint procedure.
No, I don't want to. That's what I'm saying. That I already did. It already went to the full board. The full board already voted on it.
Okay.
Not this version, but a revised version. It just still hasn't gone up. But I don't think it needs to go back before the task force.
Okay.
And I don't think there's anything in it.
I think I can clear this up.
Yeah.
I think I can clear it up. I think what's happened, it's just been attached in the packet and it just keeps coming back, right? Okay. So this is Mrs. J will remove it as we move this information forward. It'll be just the form as whatever changes that we make on work on it, and then probably a final version of the cover letter and anything else, any other materials that we feel need to go around, and then we'll take out everything else in there that is not related to it when we move it forward.
Can I say something about that? Laura, sure. The document that you were referring to for the complainant, the petitioner, was that the one that you and I edited? I took out lines and made some changes in your sentence structure. And you said, great, that's it. That's what we're looking for. I do remember doing that.
Are you talking about the online document that you shared with me?
Not the one I was just speaking of. There was another document that you and I worked on together.
Yeah, I don't remember now what that was.
All right, I'll find it.
I know this complaint procedure, this one that's here. It's not the version that got approved. And then there was another change that we made having to do with this whole idea of like the decision being effective from the point of the meeting, and then people having 5 days and all that. So it went through another small revision. And so I know that there's been 2 levels of revision on that public complaint procedure, but last time I checked, which was maybe a week ago, it still hadn't gone up. So there was the version that was my proposal that got approved, and I can't remember if that's what you gave comments on or not. I just don't remember at this point, because there were literally like 4 different documents that were supposed to change. But this one, it hadn't been put up yet. There were changes that needed to be made to reflect some other procedural changes that we had made as a task force around how to talk about like the order of decision, or what is it called? The
Order determination.
order of determination, right? We're just going to say this is a determination rather than order of determination. So then those changes got brought into this document. And so now what needs to go up is the final version that includes my approval, or what the proposal I got approved, and then the changes we made recently. And I gave that to you, Cheryl. I corrected it because I saw that people were working off an older document. So you have that somewhere in an email from me.
I suggest that's maybe a conversation that's outside the scope of this item that we're maybe getting a little adrift.
Sorry, I just was trying to clarify what was in here, but
yeah, and we can make sure the packet is streamlined moving forward, and then any of those pieces, you guys put your head together if you need to and figure out. And then there's still the lingering question that I thought was an excellent question that Member Highland asked of Mr. Young about whether or not it's within our scope to be able to consider or able to work on the actual respondents packet. So, Mr. Young, could you verify that for us?
In terms of sorry, I'm getting my words confused. The respondents packet, adjusting the order and format.
This is the instructions that go to respondents, saying we'd like for you to respond accordingly, and it gives them the instructions for how to move forward. It hasn't gone through a committee yet for committee work. Member Highland suggested it was something that we could do in this committee, and we wanted to check with you to ensure that it is within the scope of this committee for us to do that.
I would suggest that I would just need final approval from the chair at a minimum before we make any temporary changes to any format letters we send out to the respondent. There's nothing in our procedures on what goes into our respondent letters on how they should respond that I know of. But I would at least want the chair's okay before we make any changes.
So this is the item that's in the pilot phase right now. We were going, and it's been suggested that it could use, we've gotten a little bit of feedback. So we would make changes to it now kind of based on the previous feedback and our own experiences from our own committees, our other committees probably, and then we would bring it back to the full task force for consideration. So I think what we're asking you, is it appropriate within the context of the rules committee for us to spend time doing that?
So Victor, just to add to that, what we're thinking of doing is just putting our input and then forwarding it to the full task force for their review, input, more edits, and then it will become,
Oh, if that's the case, there's no issues with that. You can make your recommendations to the full task force, and they can review it before it becomes implemented.
Great. That's what I thought. So I think it might be worth stating, for the record here, and Cheryl, if you could please, with Chair Neighbors' approval, maybe at the top of this discussion say, this discussion was limited to pages 1 through 8 of the package, just to make sure the members of the public aren't confused by the old version of the complaint procedure that's tacked onto this, and we can just keep our discussions to that scope, and then offline admin we can figure out what happens to that piece. Does that sound like a reasonable course of action?
So in terms of this work, one of the things I discussed with Chair Yankee was how useful it was when Member Stein provided her line edit copies in the packet for us to see, and that it would be appropriate for us and not in violation of the Brown Act if we were to bring together our own line edit instead of trying to work through it, as we're in commission, but for us to bring together our own individual line edits, our line edits, have Cheryl put them in the packet, and then work on it, those versions, to finalize them in our next meeting. Does that sound like an okay way to work for you, or would you rather, in your experience, especially Member Highland, is it better to just work through it together? What do you think works best?
Well, I think you're talking about like the strike through and the redlining and all that.
Yeah.
That would be great. I don't know if we have the technical personnel or technology to do that. I mean, that's what should happen, and I'm a little bit leery about us discussing changes that aren't going to necessarily all get reflected, and that we're going to have to send it back to the rules committee to edit that, and then finally to the SOTF. So, if there's a cleaner way to go in and make changes, I'm all for that. The fact that we have a rogue document here tacked on does not give me confidence in our processes. So I'm going to say it like it is, but this is not the first time. This is actually more of a trend now. So, we've spent 20 minutes finally working out what we're going to be doing here. So I'd like to hear from Victor and Cheryl what our options are, perhaps for marking up this document. Maybe that's a good place to start.
I think I heard Member Stein.
I just want to, just one quick thing is that I think, I made these line edits, and we did lose information when they went out in the regular packet because they were color coded, and then people had to kind of look at them without the color coding. And I don't know if this is at all possible or like a crazy idea, or maybe it's violates whatever our things are. But I almost wonder, like, could we work on a shared Google document and make it public access, read only to the public, so that they could look at any changes that were made? It's not like a secret thing, but we would be working on the same document and making our suggestions.
Perhaps Victor could chime into that.
We have actually started working towards that. There was a request by members of the committee, or actually the chair, to be able to see the documents we have. And we were working on a shared drive where, the chair can look at our documents live. But in terms of posting a draft document online, I don't see an issue with that per se. We could create a tab and say draft procedures, and date it. It's just a matter of how often are we going to post updates to it and so forth.
Well, if there's if in an agenda or something, there's just a URL that people can potentially go to, then it's actually quite transparent, if we're making our suggestions and looking at it and whatever. And they could theoretically go look at it anytime they wanted, but
I don't see an issue with that. Of posting a draft document online.
Okay.
It's just a matter of location. You would need to pick a good location for it under documents.
And Victor, of course,
updating it, right, and making contributions to it. Does that include that, Mr. Young?
That would be another issue in that who has control over it. We need one person to have control on updating. I can't just take everyone's update and just put it up.
No, I was thinking of something like Google Docs, where the three of us would be, potential editors, and then anybody else could just have read-only access.
I would avoid using Google Docs because it's not an approved application by IT for us at this point in time.
And is there no other applications that are approved that have that functionality of group editing and then read-only access?
It's not something I've ever dealt with before.
Okay.
I will say that I had a similar issue in a project I was doing for a nonprofit here that was working with the city. And what we ended up doing was we used Microsoft Word, but we didn't use line editing. We used text comments. So in the margin with the text comment, it might say like, strike the sentence, blah, 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 replace with blah, 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 right? So that the document stays the same, but all the second suggestions are in the bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be appropriate then, Mr. Young? Would that be okay?
I'm not absolutely sure. It's just a matter of how do we apply it.
It's still a question of like what application has that functionality that's approved.
I'm
Yes.
thinking that we're probably going to be better off doing that work, providing it to Cheryl to put in the packet, and then discussing it in the meeting until we know for sure about accessibility of that technology. So that we could we've got, 2 months before the next meeting, take a look at the documents and the letter that's there, provide feedback using the comments feature. So just is Microsoft Word comments, right? Is that accessible to everyone? And then you can send that to Cheryl and she can include each of our comments in the packet for next time. Then the public has access to that and we all have access to each other's comments. Yes, Member Highland.
I think that's an excellent idea. And actually, just from what I've seen of this, it looks very polished and very obviously there's a lot of work that went into this. So I think our comments will probably be minimal. So I think that's a great way to move forward. One of the other things we have to think about with the whole shared drive and stuff is we have to be careful there's not more than X amount of us on that drive at the same time, because that might be construed a meeting, etc. Even though the technology separates the comments and stuff, the back, there's that whole, which we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard there. So that's an interesting question, whether we can ever do that. I think we can.
Cool.
With the right technology.
Anybody want to make a motion now, and then we get some public comment back from that?
Can I ask one question before any motion happens? I didn't see in this item much in the way of feedback from respondents. I feel like I have seen definitely respondent packets where they have tried to adhere to this. So I know that they're, following it in some cases, but I haven't seen any comments from anybody. I'm wondering like what constitutes our review to understand what's working, what's not working, that would lead to any changes to what we currently have.
So are you saying you think we should have put some more meat to the process of what a pilot is, and maybe even have some standard operating procedures around that folks can draw on in the future?
Maybe, I don't know, but I just wonder, like, I don't feel that qualified to make line item feedback without maybe like a little bit of study of like what have people responded to, what have they not responded to, what do we think could still be improved. I'm not sure how to assess that.
So you're thinking like, I guess I'm thinking like if I were doing this for work, I would have a focus group, or I would interview users, or I would send out a survey. And that's what I would do in a pilot.
Yeah, that might be more than we would do in this case, but I would say at least if we have like, I don't know, maybe 10 responses we've gotten that have adhered to this, just to see what they were able to do and what they couldn't do. I mean, we could follow up with them, but that is like a lot of work, but we could do that. And then of course we don't know from the people who didn't follow it, why they didn't follow it. But yeah, I mean, right now, if I were to go through and make suggestions, it would just be based on like the logic of the document that's here, not really based on the experience that anybody's had using it.
So you would like to see maybe then, before we do line edits, a sample of some of the folks. When we look at Ms. Leger's chart, she says some folks maybe tried to follow it, looks like they followed half part of it or whatever, that we get copies of those responses or pull copies of those responses and review them
I think
before.
that would be useful, even if we pulled like say 10 copies and we each reviewed 3 or 4 and said, okay, here's what we saw, and then decided if there was anything else that we wanted to change.
Thoughts on that? Yeah, Member Highland?
Okay, I'm sensing a continuation of this item might be a good idea. I don't know how quickly we want to get this full task force, but again, that's why I was trying to find out who's on first, who's on second. So this document is purely Member Stein's work. We haven't seen any, no, that's wonderful. But and yours, sorry, joint parents, joint custody, sorry.
I have primary custody,
Yeah.
and Laura's the weekend dad.
I was like the midwife.
Okay, I can see you guys be great PTA members. So exactly. So what is our review based on? We need, and I think members of the public need to see more relevant examples in the packet. So I think if we continue this item with just this piece, with maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 feedback or at least some data as to what we're basing our fine tuning of it on, that would be in the public interest.
Yeah.
Okay, when you say feedback, Chris, are you saying you want to see the response and responsive records for 10 cases so that you can determine that whether or not the specific bullet points or items in the respondent's review are being met, and if not, then the party can tell you why it is, maybe indirectly, they are not following the whole process.
No, I was just piggybacking on what Member Stein said. So what Member Stein said made sense to me, because again, I'm trying to see where is this document in the process of approval, right? Do we need to do some more due diligence? It sounds like that's what Member Stein was.
Yeah, I'm not, and I just to say, Cheryl, I don't want to see all the records anybody produced. Just the respondent letter, just the respondent memo, or where they try to kind of go through and answer the questions that we've given them. And for most respondents, that's not more than 2 pages of material. That's just their response letter, essentially. I don't want to see all the supporting documents. And then, it is a possibility that we could consider reaching out to a few of them, especially the ones that didn't quite complete it. I don't know if that we could reach them, but if we, I would be willing to call a few of them and just say, how did you find using this, respondent guidance? What problems did you have? What worked for you? What didn't work? That would be actually getting some information on how effective it is for people and what are the hindrances to them doing it. Some might say, oh, it was too long and I just got overwhelmed, or I don't know what they'll say, but I would be willing to reach out to some people.
Yeah.
So maybe what we should do is give Ms. Leger a discrete set of dates. In other words, how long has this pilot been used?
It's not that long, and we have that chart, right, of who's followed it and who hasn't.
Well, and has this been updated, Ms. Leger?
No, it has not.
Okay.
Not since I think I did it in February or something, not March. I don't know. So my own observation in looking at these responses was that many of them are, like the police department, many of them are timeline responses, not necessarily they're providing dates that they did things. This is when we received the response. This is when we wrote the letter. This is when we sent documents. Oh, we're now on a rolling basis. This is when we sent additional documents. That sort of thing. I see a lot of that, and I don't necessarily see it specifically addressing the requests for information that are asked of each respondent. I don't see it being directly responsive to what you're asking.
That's good to know also. I mean, I think we could still do the follow-up and say like,
I'm not saying that at all.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think that's a good idea. And,
Yeah, timelines are good. We like timelines. It helps kind of set the stage.
So why don't we be very specific here, as Member Helen said, give a discrete set of dates and ask Ms. Leger to capture just the letters, not the actual records themselves, between, and maybe more recent ones now that it's gotten it, it's because it's a pilot, give us some more time. So maybe try to get 10 from,
Like the 10 most recent or something.
yeah, the 10 most recent. That's a great idea.
I like that.
Just the cover memos or the cover letters. And then also, if possible, update the chart to give us the latest information. And I know we worked on at the full meeting the redoing the letter, so maybe a copy of the new and improved letter that you send out with the form now. You can take a look at that as well.
when you say the letter that we send out,
Your cover letter.
I mean the actual paragraph that's in the meat of the notice to the respondent? Because I think
Yeah,
we have that.
Yeah, and the one you've got in the packet, I believe, is the old one where it has the like document. You remember we were like, what is that document? We don't know what it is. So we made changes to that you were going to start using instead of the letter that's in this packet.
I think I did.
Yeah, so you just give us the updated letter you use.
And we probably don't need all the everything from page 9 onwards.
Yes, let's omit that. I think it's causing some confusion.
Okay. All right, that'll at least give us something where we've looked at the 10 most recent cases, we've added our input, and it gives the full task force something to vote on and say, okay, thanks for the pilot. We agree with these changes. We're going to make this, our new policy or new letter.
And we'll revisit that in our next meeting. Should we hear public comment on this item?
Why don't I make a motion to continue to the call of the chair with those suggestions, and then maybe make a public comment on that?
Yep.
So that's a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Great. Roll call vote.
We usually take public comment first.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I was like, and then we're going to roll call vote.
Yes, we have one member of the public who, for public comment at this time, I will unmute them.
Guess who? I'm sorry, it's David Pilpel. Let me know when you're ready.
We can't hear you very well.
Okay. No, they're both in use. Is that better?
Yes.
Let me close the window. We're all becoming audiovisual producers. Is this better?
Yes, that's much better. David, are you ready
Okay.
to begin?
I am.
Go ahead.
Okay. I support the motion to continue to the call of the chair. I was going to start out at a high level, and I guess this perhaps conflates a couple of the issues tonight, and I hope it's helpful and not unhelpful. So my view is that changes to the bylaws require notice and full task force approval, and that's pretty clear. I am less clear about changes to complaint procedures and what I'm calling guidance, for lack of a better term, to complainants or petitioners and respondents. My sense is that it could go a variety of different ways, and I'm tending at this point to think that it's not the bylaws, so it doesn't require the special 10 or 14-day notice, but just a regular agenda item, and probably ultimately at the full task force, in as much as the full task force, I think, controls the complaint procedures and any related guidance document, and not just the complaint committee or this committee. In both cases, I think the final text of the bylaws as amended or the complaint procedures or a guidance document should be at the full task force and approved as recommended, or, with changes that are clearly on the record and approved by the administrator, the deputy city attorney, and the task force chair as to form, to be sure that any changes that were made during a meeting or on the fly are incorporated as to the correct text, so that there isn't this back and forth about, well, we approved this, we didn't approve that, I thought that, and then all of what you just discussed. And finally, in all cases, that the administrator should post the changed document on the task force website and report back to the task force the following month in the written administrator's report that on X date, this revised document was posted and is available at this link, bang, so that the entire loop is closed on changed documents, and the lengthy discussion you just had perhaps doesn't have to be had again. Okay, let me just leave that aside. You can think about that comment if you want. On the text itself, I continue to believe that fewer documents with fewer words. Okay, I'll conclude that fewer documents with fewer words is the best approach. I have long thought that the complaint procedures summary document of 1 page is redundant, unnecessary, and complicated in as much as there already is a complaint procedures document. So where one can edit the guidance documents to complainants and respondents and reduce the number of words while retaining clarity, I think that is best. If that can be done, I would not use Google Docs, but if that can be done with tracked changes with the bubbles that either say eliminate this sentence or show very clearly with added bold or strikeout what the text changes are, then everybody can see it. Those, again, I don't know if that's helpful. Why don't I leave it at that for the moment? Thanks for listening. Oh, did I mention I support the motion to continue? Yes, thanks.
Any additional public comment? Victor, do you see Member Wolf's hand up?
I forgot to unmute myself. Mr. Wolf has control over his own microphone, but that is the only public commenter we have today.
Is it okay if I chime in? The motion came a little quick. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, just on that point of the editing, I think it'd be preferable if it was inline editing. That's how everybody in government is, and a lot of the public are used to seeing things. If there's too many edits and there's the bubbles in the margin, it's too hard. Everything gets all bunched up together. It's really hard to see what's changing and what's not, and being able to know what was there before and what was after, if there were a lot of changes in a sentence. So being able to see the strike throughs and the additions, it's a lot easier to read. So that's all I wanted to suggest. Thanks.
Thank you. So I believe that's all for public comment. Any additions or changes? Are we ready to vote? Okay, Ms. Leger, take it away.
Member Highland.
All right.
Member Highland, aye. Member Stein.
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Chair Neighbors.
Aye.
Chair Neighbors, aye. Moved by Member Highland, seconded by Member Stein to continue the matter to the call of the chair.
Okay, when you are ready to read item 4, please do so.
Item number 4, file number 22064, development of an annual report.
Right. Okay, I have a little background here to situate us. Kind of did some poking around with Ms. Leger to see what we could find. This was a matter that's been brought up a few times by members of the public, various task members. It looks like the last finalized version of an annual report that we include on our website was signed by our SAGE member Highland as acting chair in June 2016. Prior to that, Chair Washburn submitted a report on October 14, 2014. It covered May 2012 to April 14. And then Chair Johnson sent a 2-year annual report for 2010, 2011. So there's been a pattern of these 2-year annual reports. You'll notice in your packet that the last known draft of an annual report, which was to be 2016, 2017, and we're very fortunate because we can solve a mystery here. Ms. Leger could only find the draft, so we don't know if this report was finalized and submitted, but it was to cover March 31st, 2017, and it's signed by Member Wolf. So if that report was submitted, it means we haven't submitted annual reports for at least the years 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. Looks like this time of year is the time of year when reports are often submitted. So, members, what are your thoughts and how should we proceed?
So obviously I think it would be good if we were doing annual reports for a lot of reasons, including being able to understand how this ordinance is being used, and changes in use over time. I feel like there probably is the ability to look at data just from the complaints that we get, but I feel like we should be able to collect data from some of these agencies. I'm assuming they've got a log somewhere of like the requests that were made to them and how many they've responded to. At the very least, you know, I feel like, and I was hoping we were going to have a presentation from Next Request because that there has to be data there, even though it's not complete data. I would really love to know, like, what number of requests are being made every year? How many of them are actually ending up in complaints? What kinds of information are being asked for? What kinds of agencies are getting the most requests? What agencies are getting the most complaints about not responding to requests? I feel like there's a lot of important information here for us to understand and for the city to understand. So I would love to actually try to, put together some kind of report that's a little bit meatier than the draft example that we saw here. I don't know how hard it will be to do it, but I think it would be of great interest. And I should also say, like, in addition to the quantitative aspects of it, I think there might be some qualitative stories to tell about information that people got and what they did with it that would help highlight like why this is an important law, why this is an important mechanism for people to have, and that might also raise its visibility if we were doing reports.
Any thoughts, Member Highland?
No, I'm actually rereading the last annual report from 16. Just to give you guys some background, it is something that we're required to do every year. I believe that's part of our charter. Does it get any response from who we send it to? Absolutely not. But I think it's important that we do it and that it's there for the record. Show the work we're doing, the cases that we're handling, the order of determination we've done. In my report in 16, I highlighted, what were then the interesting issues. There's a lot we've done in the last 5 years. So I don't know, do we write a report from 17 to present? That might be what we have to do. just to kind of, and then go back to a yearly report. Maybe use the pandemic as an excuse. I don't know, but anyway, those are kind of thoughts that I'm considering right now.
I'll say that I went back and I read a lot of the reports, and I'm a researcher. I do quant and I do qualitative. I'm always trying to make people pay more attention to quantitative, but I really felt the stories that were told, as Member Stein mentioned, and that including the ones that you highlighted, Member Highland, were very compelling. And I immediately started thinking of cases that we've heard. I mean, even recently with the redistricting case, but, the cases that have kind of come back and we really mulled over, and they've been really compelling, and they should be really compelling to our Board of Supervisors and other people making decisions in the city. And, I don't think that those all necessarily happened in the last year. So I'm open to going back further to dip into those stories. I'd hate to miss anything,
It's 16. Give me a second. I'll put you on speaker. Take a look at my calendar.
Oh,
I think Mr.
Mr.
Young is
Yeah, we
talking
can
to someone
hear
else.
you.
Oh, yeah.
Mr.
Give me a quick second. I need to mute.
Young, you're with us and you don't mean to be. I think there's an interesting question here in terms of, I went over the bylaws to see who, I don't believe that the annual report is mentioned in the bylaws that I could find. And so it's not clear on, in the past, it's been chair, sorry, I guess you were acting chair when you wrote it. Is this a matter of tasking our chair to write the report? Is it a matter of, volunteering, divvying it up? Like, how do we want to proceed with that?
Yeah, so I think I helped Allison write her 2014 annual report as vice chair. I think I did a bulk of the work for that, and then when she stepped down as acting chair, I did that one as well. And I read a lot of the old ones as well, especially Hope Johnson's was very good, I thought. And you're right. At the end of the day, it's not about all the data and stuff. We can do that, and back then Victor was very helpful as our admin, as our clerk, with all that data. And it's important to have that data just to show the volume of what we go through. But I think whoever or whomever, select group of people, that I think we should cherry pick the stories. This is all about stories. This is about relevance. This is about continued support. It's about our position as a beacon of transparency in the country. Others. I think it's great when other cities approach us, and I know Bruce has had other city bodies approach him. I think that should be highlighted. That'd be a great thing to show off from the annual report. That's, and I think Chair Neighbors, you mentioned that kind of an approach, something a bit more modern, more rather than just bookish and reportish, and put a lot of work into it, and then it won't even get, probably won't even get opened by the person that receives it, So I think it's something that we should maybe completely change it up, something, and maybe even almost like to have like an executive summary of the report, which could be 1 or 2 pages, right, on our website, and then the link to the full report for those that want to dive into it. But that executive summary should really underscore how important we are and the work that we've done in the last 1 year, 5 years, 3 years. The more I think about it, that kind of approach I think would be quite useful. And if there is nothing in the bylaws or whatnot how to do it, we can do it how we want. Why not be relevant? Why not be modern? And we've got some great wordsmiths here that can help us with that. So maybe we just write an executive summary report. 3 pages. That's it. To the previous speaker's point, short is sweet. I don't know. that's the good news. We can do what we want with it. We can always link it to a document that follows the previous formats, but there's no rhyme or reason or rules that we have to do that. But ultimately, if any member of the Board of Supervisors or the mayor's office popped in and looked at it, they'd be like, I want them to say, wow, what these guys do is important and they're good at it, and we should keep funding them, and we should not leave them off the budget. Again, that's the reaction I'm looking for.
And I should just say, I mean, I don't mind trying to do some of the legwork on data here, in addition to stories. But I see it potentially being even relevant beyond, one person who might read it or a board of supervisors who might read it. I feel like if we actually collect data on what we're doing, that's potentially newsworthy and a way to maybe even highlight like who's following this law, who's not following this law, how is it being used, and why is it important in a way that could be important for visibility with the public as well as the local government.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember years ago, the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee, nobody ever listened to them, and they were thought to be just advocating for their own streets. And they created a report on, the increased chances of getting killed as a pedestrian by an automobile if you're a person of color in the city of San Francisco. And they sent it to the board, they didn't hear back, but they sent it to news outlets, and it got picked up many, many places and became a feature story. And then folks really did have to pay attention to it, and it led to a lot of big gains, So I imagine if we could do an annual report that really captured with some of those case studies or highlights that captured, the intersection of the work that we do as relevant to issues that people really, really care about right now, including policing, districting, the city, or whatever those issues are, especially given all the recent scandals in our local government. This could be something that writing it, you could know that people are going to read it. And it would be wonderful if we could, make room for our frequent flyers and the public to share with us what cases they felt should really be highlighted.
Or how they've used information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ladies, can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Member Stein, I just wanted to step back on something that you said about next request.
Mm-hmm.
We had somebody lined up, and he started waiting at like 7 o'clock his time for his opportunity to speak. And he got offline after 10 p.m. his time. This is East Coast time. And he was frustrated because he couldn't figure out when to press *6, I think it was, when we had teams, and what not to. He didn't know if he was in line. So I'm thinking if you and the Rules Committee think that trying to approach these people again to see if, now that we have WebEx and the system is a little more updated than Microsoft Teams, if you would want me to approach them again and see if we can't get somebody to speak on that issue.
I would actually love to, if this is something that people want me to do, about like investigating what data we can potentially get, I would love to just contact him directly to have a conversation to begin with about what the possibilities of that are. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a public forum where he's explaining things. I mean, I think still that would have been, I was looking forward to having them, and I understand what happened, but I would, if it's a question of like just talking to them about, can they even collate data for us? How hard is it to do that? What data is available? All that kind of stuff. That could be just a one-on-one conversation I have with that person.
All right, let me see if I can get that person's, I have it in my records, their name and telephone number.
I would, if you can get that would be fantastic.
Yeah, if not, I'll call Linda Jarrell and see if she has that information, but I will get that to you.
Member Wolf had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So, I just want to say that, when you're right, it doesn't, I agree with all your points. I think it's great. it's not in the bylaws. It's only in the ordinance, and the ordinance basically says that shall make a report if it sees there are any practical or policy problems. So, and it doesn't have to be just once a year. So I think, you know, doing some sort of executive summary is a good idea to get the ball rolling and say, wait for more, there's more to come. But one of the things that I think helps a lot is, like you were talking about the stories, is going through the orders of determination and picking out those kind of very, you know, kind of significant complaints that we've had to deal with that show that there are problems in the implementation. And where there are, and as you were saying, Chair Neighbors, are you chair of this committee?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Chair Neighbors. What you were saying was, you know, because we're dealing with some anomalies and scandals and what not like that, where there are kind of uninterpreted areas, like we were talking about the redistricting task force and like not knowing who's responsible there, you know, for managing Sunshine. That's an interesting item. The other one was the museums. You remember that whole debacle with around the friends of the museums, and then the corporation for the museums, and the museum itself as the government entity. It's like who is who in this, and who's eligible for, you know, who's responsible or required for Sunshine. That was another interesting that we could not even get a legal counsel answer on. So I think those kinds of things are important, because that could also, somewhere else in government, somebody could say, oh yeah, I had that same problem, but I got more information, or what you're telling me gives me more information. You know, it could be very helpful if somebody's doing some sort of investigation. So I don't know, that was just my thought. Thanks.
Member
I,
Hunt.
I think one of the things we should mention, and it's just like 101, and whenever I'm asked the question, what is the Sunshine Task Force? What do you do? I always, you know, I try and make it sexy and throw in some examples and whatnot. But seriously, something like, we help journalists get the material they need for their articles. All the great articles you've seen over the last 5 years, a lot of them have come before us, or they've used our Sunshine Ordinance and laws to get that information. For example, you know, that could be one lead in. You know, I don't want to give anyone the impression that we're involved in the, you know, the actual lawmaking of these issues, but more on the transparency and allowing Joe or Jane Q Public to get the information, or a professional lawyer to get the information, or a body to get the information, or
Activists, employees, NGOs,
or a mom that
whoever.
lost a son to get the video cam from the police department. That's a great story. That happened, you know.
You know who I was thinking about was Patrick Roddy, Chris. And he
What's
wanted
that?
all that. Patrick Roddy wanted all that information on deaths in San Francisco. You know, what was the leading cause of death?
Right.
And he was doing all that research, and he was comparing it to what he learned in England.
Yeah.
So I thought that was when I first started. I thought that was very interesting.
He got blocked left and right.
Yeah.
He did.
How can we put some structure to this?
I think, you know, I started to look at this, but I didn't have a lot of time to get very far. But I think we should talk about, like, what are the questions or categories of data that we think are important to have, and then see if we can get them, right? As well as, like, what are some of the most relevant stories of how information was used. You know, and obviously we could go back over our notes from the last year. We can look at the orders of determination. But, you know, I think it would be really useful to know a lot of categories of data, and there are a lot of categories of data that are out there in annual reports that are done by other government entities all around the world. So I was trying to kind of look through some of my notes on that stuff, and just talk about like what is the data that we think is relevant here. That's where I would want to start, I think. And then maybe a plan of action for reviewing it so that it's not just like ad hoc pulled out of the air. But you know, and I don't think it's, if we were to do it like this, I don't think it's something you could just throw onto the chair or the vice chair. I think you need like a small group of people who are looking at the different pieces of it, and it obviously has to be manageable in the time that we would have and be able to devote to it and all of that. But I started to make a list of some, you know, categories of data, like, you know, what, and we could see whether we can sort of scan the requests we've had and answer some of these questions.
Okay. So it sounds like Member Stein could be our quant person managing that piece. And then Member Highland, were you raising your hand because you wanted to manage the stories piece?
Not quite. I think well, either myself and perhaps maybe Member Wolf would be good on the stories just because of the, you know, the institutional knowledge we have, and also, you know, Member Wolf was chair for so long and maybe had some communications from outside Sunshine agencies, which would be great to pop up and display. So that would be good. But I was just thinking, as far as, you know, there's the quant piece, which could further link back to the old formats of, and I think, Victor can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think they keep data of how many departments had how many hearings, orders of determination, all that. You know, kind of like a hit list of who's behaving, who's not behaving. That's kind of interest, you know, to the overall government. You know, see where most I guess complaints have come from, which departments.
Wait, are you talking about the annual report of the Supervisor of Public Records?
No, I'm talking about.
Has it?
So, for instance, in the 2016 report, we had a table of which departments had the most amount of complaints and orders of determination. That was, you
That
know,
came from where?
that came. I think Victor helped us with that. I think that came from, you know, all the work they did, taking in the complaints and the orders of determination and whatnot. That's of interest, you know.
Yeah.
And
I don't recall doing it, but I must have.
How hard is that data to look at?
It's relatively easy. It's just we look at all the ODs on our list, and then we look at just our complaint log. So it's just a matter of taking a little bit of time and looking at the names and ODs.
Is that something you can share with us? So like you wouldn't necessarily
It's
have to
something
do
that
it?
we would need some time to prepare. We don't do it for any other reason until you request it.
No, I
It's
meant
not
like,
something
can
we
you
do on a
just
regular
like,
basis.
I mean, like, can I see the log and do that compilation so that you guys don't have to
You
do
can
it?
have a copy of our complaint log. That's no problem.
Okay.
So, and I guess the question here is, you know, I really like the idea of if we can keep the, you know, the promo piece, if you like, or the executive summary to 3 pages. One could be quant, one could be the stories, and one could just be the, you know, what is this document, you know, introduction, summary kind of thing. That'll really help us distill what we're looking for. And, you know, do we need, and then the other thing is, what's our scope here? Is it 5 years? Or is it just the most interesting stories in the last 5 years? I think that's a better way to go. And I see Chair Neighbors nodding her head. So that, you know, that way we're not bound to producing all this data. And, you know, for what Victor's going to put together for us, it could be, you know, just in the last 5 years, which departments have had more than 5, you know, ODs against them, or more than 10 complaints. So it could be the you know, the high flyers, for instance, and not every little department that has only had 1 or 2 all listed. We don't need to see all that. So, and again, you know, do you want to even include that information? Are we kind of slapping them on the wrist, or are we just showing the members of the public, you know, don't worry, you're not alone. trying to get information out of X or Y department. There's a lot of people also trying to do the same thing. Don't give up. We're here to help you. I don't know. So, a lot of it's packaging, but I'll stop.
Yeah, I
there.
think it has to be carefully presented, but I think in the name of transparency, it's good for people to know, who's responding and who's not responding but I still would go broader if possible than just what we're handling as a board, but trying to look at how sunshine ordinance is being used in the city, not just the complaints that the appeals or the complaints that are made, but like how much information is being requested, how many responses, are people getting, that kind of thing. So that's why I'd like to look at next request to understand more broadly how this law is being used and not just the complaints that come before us.
But know that next request isn't being used by every department.
No, I know that. That's what I'm saying. That's very partial. I mean, in the ideal world, I would like to reach out to these departments. I don't know that they would respond, but just to ask them, like, can you look at your logs and tell me how many information requests you fulfilled last year? Like, I wouldn't mind calling, 20 departments and trying to get this information.
Let me throw this out here, and this is a consideration. If we're, and this is kind of trailing on to something Member Highland said. We haven't really articulated our purpose yet, and I think that changes a lot of the decisions that we might make around what we present. So, for instance, if our objective is to educate the record providers and get them to provide more records more easily and make fewer violations, we might not name the frequent offenders. And instead, what we might do is ask Victor to comb through the ODs and look for the most frequent violations and spend some time explaining them and explaining how departments can avoid making those violations, right? So we could take on that educational frame of it instead, thinking of it in terms of like how to help the readership inside the system do a better job in the first place. I think there's some merit to that. I'm not completely sold on my own idea, but if we're not doing that, I think we have to be, if our purpose is then more of exposing where the gaps are, where the faults are, I think we have to be very careful about how we do that and do it in a way that is still very constructive. Because we still, in the end, we still want more sunshine, right? That's the objective, is more, we want to put ourselves out of a job. We want more transparency and more sunshine. So how can we go about doing that? Is there anything else that, I'm thinking also as Victor's doing this kind of labor with the ODs, is there anything else we want him to pull out and look at? And so that we're not like wishing he could go back again, like making him, go back through it multiple times. Are there other pieces that we could pull? I personally would like to see, I think we kind of know anecdotally, but I would like to have a count of the most frequent violations, the top violations, because I think that could be compelling to the readers. So 2 points. Is it educational or more of an expose? Where does it land in that? And what else should we be pulling from the ODs?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it should be framed as an expose. But for me, I think two of my top goals would be to raise the visibility of the Sunshine Ordinance for the public. As Member Highland kind of hinted, is he gone? I don't see him anymore. But
It's great.
yeah, it doesn't seem like a sexy thing, sunshine, or, people, it seems like arcane or something in the US context, but in many places around the world, it's like understood by a lot of citizens to be like a primary tool they have to get information and to get accountability for things that the government is doing. And I feel like raising its visibility so people understand like the power of that tool, and also maybe creating some pressure towards better compliance, but without seeming what's the word? Without being confrontational, just kind of like creating an environment for better compliance, I think is a worthy goal too. But to me, like, the public is front and center. In my ideal world, every San Franciscan knows this tool is there, knows that it's not hard to use, knows that they can get information that might be relevant to them across a range of issues that might be affecting their lives, from the personal to the community-based.
Sure. And we can gather the data and then see, as we're putting together the report, see how it feels, see how it looks, and make those decisions then too, with different pieces of it.
Yeah, but I do think educating record providers is good too. I definitely don't think this should be confrontational in any way, but I think the goal for me is really like public understanding as well as governmental understanding of how this tool is being used and our own understanding, because I don't feel like I have a holistic picture, having just done this for 2 years and not really ever being able to take stock of anything beyond the complaints, right? I don't even know what's happening out there beyond the complaints.
Yeah.
Maybe the complaints are 0.00001% of the number of requests that are being made and fulfilled. I have no idea. Maybe they're 10%.
Yeah, I wanted to make that point because we have been challenged in the past of whether we should exist at all by the various supervisors. They actually did a budget analyst report. It's actually a public document, and they actually did that study in over the course of a year, I think. And really, the number of complaints that we get is an absolute sliver of a sliver of a sliver of the number of requests that are made on an annual basis. So, when somebody says, "Oh, it's too onerous to have the Sunshine Task Force," it's like the city. The report on the city abiding by the Sunshine Ordinance is actually pretty good. When you look at how people ask for information and they get it. It's just whether people are, take the time or brave enough to bring it to our body if they run into a problem. That's kind of the long and the short of it in a lot of ways. So, the question is when we started seeing a lot more complaints, actually, even though it was maybe coming from one person, the fact is are we able to scale if there was like a big resistance by, city departments not to comply? How would that look? And I don't know whether that's worthy of putting into a report, but it's just worthwhile to say in general. But still, it's a very small amount. I mean, when you minus the anonymous largesse of complaints, I think we get 60 to 70 a year that we actually hear, and that's just the maximum that we could possibly do, figuring 5 complaints a meeting. Somewhere around 5 on the average. So.
Yeah, and also I feel like because we are supposed to kind of have our finger on what are the issues surrounding Sunshine, that just looking at the appeals is a small fraction of what's going on out there. And and a report like this could also make the city look good by showing that they're responding to an enormous amount of requests on a regular basis,
So it sounds like we want to proceed with the report. We realize it's important. We want to capture stories from over these kind of missing years, focusing on the most recent years. What should our next step be in terms of this committee? Yes, Member Highland.
I was going to say we could either go with this committee or maybe just form a ad hoc group committee, what do you want to call it, to tackle this and only this, because it is a pretty big project. I was going to maybe invite Member Hill because I think he has some background in journalism or advocacy or all the above. I think he'd be a great storyteller.
Member Padmanabhan is actually a journalist, right?
There you go. There you go. So there's some more people we can. So I think what might be useful is we can just say we brainstormed. We're thinking something along these lines, and maybe at the next full task force, this can be a line item. We could pop it out and say, okay, who would like to? We'd like to have maybe 2 people do the quant, 2 people do the stories, 2 people do the rest, or something like that, and give people, especially the new members, a chance to jump in.
Yeah.
And maybe give them a chance to say, like, what information do they think we should be looking for?
And members of the public can comment, and then we can get people excited about it, and we can present it and say, here's what we were thinking. The scope would be not necessarily it doesn't have to be year by year or cover the last 5 years, but we're going to look back the last 5 years as and pull out the highlights. We're going to do some quantitative analysis as to which departments are doing well, which departments are not doing well. There's a lot of very interesting, San Jose versus Smith. There's some other legal cases that have, worked in tandem with what we do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that, and then I think, on the story side, someone to maybe even, write about how journalists use us in the Sunshine Law and where these things end up would be a great, an appealing angle to present, just to first catch, get people interested. So maybe just a loose structure to put to the whole task force and then form a subcommittee, maybe.
That's a great suggestion.
Is it possible to do something like this as just a working group that's not like a committee that necessarily has to have public meetings? Because it's just a report on how the information has been used. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to do that without all the formality to it, where you could have documents that are shared and whatever, because you're not making a policy decision, you're just writing a report.
Haven't we been down that road?
I don't know how we really, because I haven't seen anyone try, but I don't know.
Oh, we tried. I asked lots of questions of our legal counsel about that, and there was concerns about quorum and a lot of backroom work that was not being made public, and I think it needs to be explored. I got a lot of pushback from that.
I've just never been in any kind of body or board where actual report writing, was had to be done in a public forum. Like maybe when you finished a report or when you had a draft of a report, it maybe went into a broader forum. But actually trying to do every single process in public, in a public meeting I think it is an extremely difficult way to work and not necessarily always a good way to work.
I agree. But when the decision makers are actually doing the work and they are getting together, it makes
But we're not making any decisions other than we're writing a report.
I think what Member Stein's trying to say is we're not doing anything substantive. That's the term we should use.
I get it.
However, we're held to a higher bar, right? As far as X amount of us getting together and all that. We could hire an outside agency, Stein and Neighbors Incorporated.
I was going to say, I'm actually doing that for another commission in another city right now. But what we're doing, it's still in California, what we're doing, I was thinking of that, is that we have a very public work plan. So it's very clear on the work plan, there are a bunch of different folks doing research on a bunch of different items. Then my office is the main writer, but with every step, we're like, here's the outline, and we get public comment on it, right? And then we go back and we write like a more in-depth substantive outline, and we get public comment on it. So we bring it back at every stage for public comment, but we do the work, but not in public. But
Urge you to talk to DCA Price Wolf.
I would love to know if there's some kind of process we can find like that, because I just think this actually, I understand the idea of a higher bar, but I'm not sure it's an appropriate bar. And if it's a bar that actually makes it very difficult to do our work, and it's not an appropriate bar, then I would love to revisit that and see if there's a way that we can have a process that has public check-ins at the relevant points, but gives us a little bit of space to get the work done in a reasonable manner.
So maybe, member chair neighbors, maybe if you sent that template of what you're doing to DCA Price Wolf and say, what do you think? I'm sure he's going to say, nice try, but no. But at least we can explore, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I could have a conversation with him about it. That might be a great idea. And kind of walk him through how we're doing this, because it's another city, but it's a nearby city. And kind of how we am very concerned. I mean, this is a joint authority commission. It's like, all, you know, the mayor's on, like lots of folks. So we've been very, very careful. And I can maybe explain to him how we kind of made the decisions we did and see what he thinks. And then we'll know. If he says no, then we'll know he said no. But we'll know that we gave it one more try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to produce the best work product that we can while being transparent. And I feel like this process of only doing things in the public meeting and whatever is not necessarily leads to the best work product.
Well, the other,
And I understand when you're making decisions that are affecting somebody, but this is a report of what we have done.
I mean, the other option is, you know, kind of like I did when I wrote the last annual report. I did all the work with the help of the administrators. I then presented it as a draft to the full task force. They gave their blessing. Public comment was made, and then it was sent forward. So, you know, it takes away the collaboration, doesn't it? Which is hard. I mean, unless we can clearly define, like, okay, you work only on this, you work only on this, and then it all comes together in a general meeting, maybe. I mean, that's kind of how we've always done things. Because, you know, there's got to be enough times for the public to see it, comment on it, edit it, repackage it. But it sounds like what Chair Neighbors is saying, it's even more efficient the way they're doing it in terms of public access and public comment and whatnot, the online thing. But I can immediately think of some of our regular members of the public who would not like the online piece of this. So there you go.
We make commission reports as well. So it's in the packet. It's like any way that we can get folks to get it, we're making it available to them, and we make an oral report on it at every commission meeting.
Oh, okay. Great. I remain hopeful.
So if you want member neighbors, chair neighbors, sorry, I'm willing
It's a
to
mystery.
I'm willing to write up a little proposal synopsis of what we've discussed here tonight and maybe embellish it a little bit by looking at studies that I have on how other governments or whoever collect information on freedom of information, and just kind of throw in some ideas about this is the kind of data that we could be talking about. These are the kinds of purposes or objectives that we might have, as well as the synopsis of our discussion, and then we can build on it from there if you want.
Okay. So do we want to revisit this as this group at our next meeting, or do we want to suggest to Chair Yankee that we discuss this with the full task force when possible at the next meeting, then when it can be agendized? Yeah, Member Highland.
I think we should bring it back one more time here, working on the template. The tighter we can get it, the more focused it makes the whole task force when they get it.
Okay. I agree, and the more detailed it can be, and actually I would love to try to reach out to the next request person and maybe start to even assemble a list of like other agencies that we might contact to see what data they might have. It would just be useful to know like what we can even get.
Sure.
Right? If it's all pie, what's pie in the sky and what might be actual obtainable information in a in a relatively short amount of time. I will say though, on the quantitative end, I would really like to just focus on the past, like on 1 year, not on 5 years. But maybe for the qualitative end, it can be a bit more expansive.
I was thinking that you could do the life of the ordinance.
Yeah.
Not really. Okay.
Yeah, but I have, so I do have a lot of, I have like a vast amount of work I've done on freedom of information law, so I can easily kind of go through and look at like what are the categories of data that have been collected around the world about freedom of information laws, what do people think is relevant, and kind of list all that out.
Okay. So on the question of developing an annual report, is there a motion?
I move that we take steps to develop an annual report. Is that enough?
Do we say that we go ahead, Mr. Highland, Member Highland? I saw your mouth moving.
It, okay.
Or that we develop a proposal for an annual report that we will take to the full task force.
Sure, we continue to our next meeting, right? Because we continue this discussion to the next meeting, at which point, yeah, I don't think we need to put that in the motion, but we can just continue it till the next meeting.
That's,
Yeah.
that's all I need.
Okay. Got that, Ms. Leger?
Yeah, second. Who's the second? Who seconded that?
Member Highland will second.
Okay. Okay, do we want to take public comment?
Let's do it.
Okay, we have one member of the public with us today. I will unmute their line.
David Pilpel. So in my experience serving on the task force on and off over the years, annual reports have varied as to timing and content. I personally think that it should be through April 27th or just prior to. The idea that we had a few years back was that presenting the annual report to the Board of Supervisors so that it was a piece of information that the Rules Committee could consider as they were considering appointments or reappointments to the task force seemed like a great idea. And at one point, we had provided for that somehow. That seems to not currently be in the bylaws. I can go back and find if we had it there and pulled it out, what happened, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, further, in my view, the annual report should summarize more so the task force's operations, meetings, whatnot, caseload, et cetera, and highlight important issues, problems, and potential solutions, more so than tracking public records requests by each department, although I hear, some ideas around that. Bear in mind that the audience for the annual report tends to be small, as in smaller than the number of people on the call tonight. Frankly, nobody really reads it, and that's probably unfortunate. I would consider amending the bylaws in the future to specifically provide for the annual report under Article 5, maybe add a Section 5 for the annual report. 67.30C, I believe the third sentence talks about the task force reporting to the Board of Supervisors at least annually on any problems with implementation, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of, as Member Wolf suggested, that's really the only reference to annual reporting other than the Supervisor of Records annual report, which the city attorney still manages to pump out every year. And that only has a limited audience. Anyway, I would continue to consider the objective or the purpose of the annual report. I would consider trying to improve relations with departments who generally are not fond of this task force as being, and that there's an opportunity to do so with the annual report. If you, call up 20 departments and ask them for more data about the sunshine requests that they get, I'm not sure that's going to make them happier about the task force, but that's up to you to decide on data gathering and how you present it stories can be interesting, but again, if nobody reads it, then what's the point? And then I just wanted to end talking about two things. Member Stein commented on her frustration in doing the work. I can assure you that frustration that you expressed is exactly the day-to-day frustration that members of boards and commissions, department heads, city staff, I mean, not the frontline staff that are driving buses and fighting fires and tending to rec centers, but all the administrative folks that make stuff happen in the city are frustrated by the difficulties in getting the work done, as you expressed it, because of our sunshine laws. And on the one hand, it is difficult. On the other hand, that's what the voters passed. So the last thing I was going to say is that San Francisco really has a different experience, in my view, in how we access meetings and records. When I've gone to other jurisdictions to share neighbors in the Bay Area and other agencies, generally you ask for a document, they say, oh, here it is, or how can I get it to you? They're not so worried about the law and the deadlines and the IDRs and redaction, all that. They just give you the stuff because very few people ask. Here we've made it into like an industry and a combative environment where if you didn't get something, or you got something 5 minutes late, or you asked for 10 things and you only got 9, then you threaten to take them to the task force and they have to sit around for 5 hours. I mean, we've made this into a huge thing in San Francisco that is not like this, in my experience, in other public agencies around the Bay Area.
Thank you, Mr. Philpott. Thank you so much.
There you go.
Any changes or additions? Or shall we move to a vote?
Okay.
Ready to vote? Okay, Ms. Leger, whenever you're ready, we're ready.
Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Member Highland?
Aye.
Member Highland, aye. Chair Neighbors?
Aye.
Chair Neighbors, aye. Moved by Member Stein, seconded by Member Highland, that the committee take steps to develop a proposed annual report and continue this matter to the next meeting.
Great, let's hear the next item.
Okay, hang on a second. Sorry, guys. Let me try out the information. All right, item number 5, file number 22065, bylaw amendment and correct procedure for a task force member filing a complaint.
Okay, members, so this is something that came up recently with a current member who ended up withdrawing his complaint. But I was reminded that in the past, former member Josh Wolf was also in this, if I remember correctly, he filed a complaint and then recused himself. And it was like almost, yeah, and then he filled the role of the, maybe even literally got on the other side of the, yeah, and he was the complainant. So that was my mind. There may have been other times as well that I'm sure Member Wolf and Member Highland can tell us about. But one of the things that kind of came up realizing this was that we don't seem to have an existing standard procedure for what we do when a member would like to file a complaint. And so this may warrant a bylaws change or amendment. So are there any additional information from the past in the Wayback Time Machine that our older members could provide us with? Yes, Member Wolf.
I think you meant to say more experienced members.
Seasoned?
Careful now. I'll take glasses off. Does that help? No, I Josh Wolf, I remember that. But prior to that, no.
Okay.
I think Member Wolf's on mute.
his little mute thing is on, but he's not, no noise is coming out of him. He seems to be muted.
Hallelujah.
I'm sorry. Try again, Member Wolf. No.
WebEx is not being kind to him.
So do we need are you suggesting that we discuss if we need any special rule or procedure when a member of the task force files a complaint? I mean, other than,
Can you hear me?
like, do we want to formalize that they recuse themselves from any decision making?
Right.
I would definitely do that. And then, yeah.
There's a problem with that because, under Robert's rules, when somebody is recused,
Mhm.
they don't necessarily recuse themselves. The body recuses them because they recognize that there is a conflict of interest. Usually it's financial, but in our case, it's an appearance of conflict that might cause somebody to be biased towards one party or another. So when somebody wants to make a complaint, obviously they're biased. They're filing a complaint.
Mhm.
So, but once a person is recused, they're not supposed to stay in the room because that could influence the other decision makers. So they usually are supposed to leave. So how do you become the complainant and the recused at the same time is the issue. So the question is, and I always, frankly, in all the years I've been on the task force, I would always go visit other commissions. I would make, kind of basic records requests to see how the system is working and report back to the task force. And if there were any problems, that's where the issue is. How do we then deal with if there are problems? And maybe it can't be dealt with on a more global, broad level, but you're dealing with something very like a specific body that is constantly violating. How do you get it to stop that? So that's kind of the rub here is, do we have a process if, the body can say, somebody makes a presentation and then we all decide, whether it is worthy of a complaint. And then we can run it through, have a special process for running it through our complaint procedure.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
So Member Highland had his hand up, and then after that, Member Stein.
So, Member Wolf, going back to your hypothetical, if a member of task force requests information, doesn't get it, files a complaint, and then presents it before the task force, he or she could request an absence from that meeting and show up as a complainant. Period.
No, I would say the whole task force takes it on as an issue, as a complaint that the task force will take on unto itself. The task force is recognizing there's a problem.
Got it.
It wants to deal with it itself, ourselves, versus having a complaint come forward. And it would have to be, something that is very blatant. That there were major problems with. I mean, there have been some very difficult public meetings out there. We've just experienced a whole slew of them. But in the past, there were some other ones that were very difficult. There were ethics commission meetings, like around the sheriff in dealing with, that situation. And all of a sudden there's a bomb threat and everybody's got to leave the room. And like, who's talking to who once they leave the room? It's like they're, how do we deal with those kinds of issues? Like if you remember that green benefits district, we had a slew of those. In the very, very beginning, I attended some of those for the Buena Vista. And then I stopped going because I realized, there's going to be a problem here. And I might have to recuse myself. So I went to one meeting and then never went to any others.
So just to continue the hypothetical, if we brought a case against X department, they would still have the opportunity to come and defend themselves before us. and then one of us could step aside and be the complainant representing the task force. I see the problems we're getting into here.
You could be the prosecutor
or the admin.
way.
Yeah.
But you don't even need to do that. The task force can just ask questions of them. It's like there's a complaint. There doesn't have to be a complainant. It's the complaint that is in front of us. And then it's up to the respondent to respond whether they violated or not. And the task force can continue to make an order of determination based upon that. It's just a process as to when the task force feels that we feel that there is such gravity of a particular situation. And we would have to go ahead and approve whether we want to take it on in the first place or not. You know, right now, a complainant can bring something forward. We don't deem its intent. We run it through our sausage making process. And,
so I guess the question is, do we need to do anything? Can we already do this? In which case, we don't have to change.
We lost your audio.
We lost you, and
okay.
Member Stein in the queue. I'm wondering if we could get Member Stein's question first and come back to you.
Yeah, it's not really a question. And I don't, I'd have to go back and study Robert's Rules of Order, but this is not the first board I've been on that followed Robert's Rules of Order. And what we've done when there is a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest is that person recuse themselves from any decision making and from any discussion about the decision making. I'm very hesitant to develop a separate process for members of the board because to me that seems like it's not necessarily equitable. Like if we have a process, it should be good for everyone. And I don't feel like we should be taking away the full scope of the process that we would offer anyone who wants to bring a complaint. But I definitely would want them to recuse themselves. I don't think it even has to be like, well, it could be from the room for that discussion and when we're actually decision making. Certainly they should not be voting on anything, but then I think it also raises a question of going forward, whether they would need to recuse themselves from any other complaints against the same agency.
I guess what I'm saying is that the task force members have a certain kind of insider privilege. And I think there are many members of the public that wish the task force would play a little more of an active watchdog role when there are active problems with, mostly it's with open meetings. I mean, we've done this, like, for instance, take the, for the public records part, take the museums issue. We went to task on that to try and uncover what the real story was there, and went down a huge rabbit hole with that. And it's still, I don't think it's even been resolved. But with a public meeting, it's a little different, and a lot of people just really don't know what to do. So all I'm saying is when there's something egregious that a task force member can bring it forward and have the entire task force decide whether it's worthy of their time to hear that complaint and to hear from the respondent as to whether they are in compliance or not. I have issues, for instance, I have issues with certain commissions where the clerk or the secretary tells the meeting members to turn off their video. Well, you don't know if you still have quorum or not. They could have gone up and gone out to have lunch for an hour. And because, that's how long that item, is taken before a vote or any discussion comes. So I get concerned about things like that. And that happens all over. So, providing guidance in all that is fine. But when it becomes egregious, meeting after meeting after meeting, and nobody's bringing a complaint forward, I think it's our duty to to make us think about it.
That may be, but I still would not want to create a different complaint process for a member of the committee. I would want to maybe handle that through some other mechanism. I'm hesitant anyway to put everything through a complaint process. And maybe I don't really understand exactly what we're talking about because I don't know any details about former members or current members wanting to make complaints, but I'm just very hesitant to have a separate process for a member. It just seems inequitable, or the potential for inequitability is there. And then there obviously is a potential for a conflict of interest that I think also needs to be addressed. And I understand there are concerns we might have about different agents or bodies that are out there, but then we should adhere to our complaint process.
Brian.
So let me put it this way. Maybe Member Wolf can ask this. Have we, as a body, ever heard a complaint against anybody? I don't think we have.
We have never brought somebody forward. The only thing that we have done was order people to the EOT committee for a, kind of training and to figure out how and what they do, and to let them know that they're either in compliance or not compliance.
My feeling is we don't need to change our bylaws to do this. I think it's already within our power. And if we've already brought them before EOT, that's as good a place to start as any. So maybe what we need to be doing is just do more of it rather than, and not worry about, do we have to add another line item in our bylaws to be able to do it, right? I think it's something that we're empowered to do. And we just have a supervisor record show up and we show them our request and what they didn't do, and have them give them a chance to go through the process with us directly. I mean, isn't that within the charter?
Well, I mean, there's not much controlling what we can or cannot do with regards. There's the 6721 process, which is just for public records, but for public meetings, there really isn't any at all. The only thing that covers for that for us is if we see any problems. Our power, the authority that the ordinance gives us, is if we see any violation of the Brown Act, the CPRA, or the Sunshine Ordinance, we can just directly, expressly go send it for law enforcement, for some sort of enforcement. We don't even need a process. We can just take a vote and say this was wrong, send it to enforcement. Okay, that's a little bit drastic, I think. What I'm suggesting is that if a member observes a non-compliance, it's not a bias issue. They're observing it in their official role as an observing a meeting, and they want to bring it to the attention of the task force. And the task force then gets to decide, based upon how it's presented in its merits, whether it's worthy of taking it on as a complaint. Now, how it gets adjudicated, or what should there be an order of determination, or should it go to EOT, or whatever that can be discussed later. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm trying to understand and figure out, how does that member present it to the task force so it has some traction?
I'll just pop in and say, I know members sign. I was thinking that maybe an analogy that might kind of work for you as someone in academia, and for me, I was always a mandatory reporter, right? So if a student comes to you and tells you about some kind of abuse, you must lawfully report that abuse to someone on campus who can investigate it. And I kind of think, we're not mandatory reporters, but if I see something at a meeting that is a violation of the ordinance, there's a sense of, Nobody, you know, it's like we know the ordinance, we work with the ordinance all the time. There is a kind of an ethical call to report that. And it's very different than if somebody was filing public record requests, and then they were coming in to go through that process. But I think what we're talking about here is more you observe two members texting to each other on their phones, right? That's something that you would want to bring to the attention of the task force. And so I think then the question to me is, I think I agree that the members should bring it, present it, and then the full task force decides on the merits of the case. But I do think there needs to be some kind of structure in terms of how do they bring it? Do they fill out the regular, you know, are there regular forms that they fill out? Is there a new, you know, you have to come and you have to make a presentation of this many minutes, or what are the pieces of that? Because it's helpful for the member as well. And it also keeps it, I think, on an even playing field.
Yeah, I just, I mean, I guess I think you can see many different ways you could deal with it without necessarily sending it through a formal complaint process. And I think if it goes through a formal complaint process, I'm just still very hesitant to create a separate process for members. It could look like, oh, we really favor it or show favoritism to a member. We as a whole task force get behind supporting this complaint. I mean, it just puts the respondent and the task force, I think, in a different kind of position. So, you know, I still could see, yes, we could hear that there's this issue. We could decide to speak to them. We could decide to write a letter. We could decide to report it to the ethics commission. I don't think it necessarily has to go through a complaint process. And if it went through a complaint process, I'm just still hesitant to have a different process than, you know, what a normal complainant would have. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it's not. I also I question whether having this sort of legalistic complaint process is the right way to handle every what's the word, like failure to live up to the ordinance.
You mean our regular complaint process?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it very well, but I mean, just if we want to be effective in getting compliance, if we notice that something is wrong, it's not necessarily that it has to go through this semi-legal complaint process.
We are quasi-judicial.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling is we're a little too quasi-judicial, that sometimes there are other things that we should be doing besides just the quasi-judicial piece that we don't always do, or that we don't often do, right? All the other pieces that people are talking about that are under our mandate, and everything gets filtered into this one quasi-judicial thing. Maybe in this case, writing a letter, having a conversation is how you would start. And then if there really is a serious infraction that they're not willing to rectify, then maybe you bring a complaint, but you do it with the same process that everybody else brings a complaint.
I mean, that letter, the first initial letter could come from EOTC as a training suggestion letter, like, hey, we noticed X, Y, and Z. Do you guys need some help in this area? And then if there's no response or no improvements, then we say, we gave you a chance. Now we're going to formally bring you guys in and remind you of what you need to be doing. That could be maybe more along the lines of what you're suggesting, Member Stein, as far as more quasi and less judicial.
Yeah, and I just don't want any members of the public to feel like, oh, because somebody on the task force noticed it and wanted compliance, it was like a whole different process than the members of the public get.
But you see, that's the thing. The rub is the public wants us to take issues on directly. They don't care that it might. In fact, they would prefer it not to have to go through the process and have the task force be able, in its own power, to take on an issue, directly and adjudicate it. What I'm trying to do is slow down that train from making it so express and saying, if somebody notices something, let the whole task force decide whether it has it's worthy of a complaint process at all. And you can build whatever kind of litmus or thresholds or bars or whatever you want, conditions to be able to make that so. You can make it a very high bar if so that it really, like, maybe there would have to be video. You'd have to bring there have to be absolute evidence to show that this happened. That takes the bias out of it because you're seeing it happen right in front of you. It could be any number of things like that. All I'm saying is there's been a lot of angst from the public, and they've been very vocal over many years that they felt that this was something that the task force should have taken up. And because of how our complaint process works, and it takes so long, that it gets lost. So that has been the experience, that my experience here in this task force with regards to that. And we've also been criticized as being weak for not taking up those issues when they happen. That we've been silent.
But I think the piece, I agree that we hear more often than not the public saying like, hey, take leadership on this or step into this space. And I agree, according to the ordinance, I think that is, a big piece of the mandate as well. But I am, sympathetic with the concern of it seeming like we're cutting to the front of the line when we have such a backlog of cases. And so it sounds like that's a concern, having a two-tier system, right? Member sign where the members can go faster and the public has to go slower. Is there a way that we can address that?
And also, if we're taking it on as a board, then it seems like we're not impartial to deciding it. I know you're saying like, oh, it'd be very clear and the evidence would be like irrefutable. But still, if we're coming into it that we're taking this up as a board, as a complaint process, as a semi-judicial, quasi-judicial thing, and we're already decided this thing, I don't know, I have to like think about it more, but I just wonder if there are better processes that are not part of that typical formal complaint process to let them know we don't think they're complying and we'd like them to be aware of the ways in which we don't believe they're complying and we would like to see change.
Well, I can just say from my own experience, watching a meeting happen and watching the public being either interrupted a lot by the chair or other members, or maybe making changes in how long a person speaks from item to item. That should not happen. If you're going to say it's going to be 2 minutes, then it's 2 minutes for the whole meeting. If you want to change it later to 3 minutes in another meeting, then the whole meeting should be 3 minutes for public comment. So I've experienced some of those things. It's unnerving, and the public doesn't know what to do because they feel once the meeting's over, that's it. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't reverse the what just happened.
Member Highland?
You know what? I'm taking a look at bottom of page 41.
Of what?
Section 2. What's in our packet here are, basically our
Bylaws?
in our bylaws, yeah. There might be something here that we can use. Special or ad hoc committees. Under approval by a majority of members of the task force may form special or ad hoc committees. Special committees shall be formed for a specific purpose and cease to exist after completion of a designated task. Special committees may be composed of members of the task force and may include members of the public, city officials, or city employees as well. We could use that procedure to invite, and it could be maybe 3 or 4 of our members only. It could be the department head or, the department that we're targeting, other people, that are part of the, records request or setting up the meetings or the secretary of the commission or whatever. And that could be a committee to look at their department and how they're dealing with the Sunshine Task Force. Now, if they choose not to be a part of it or not to, come to the meetings, that's another question. But I'm trying to think of the whole due diligence and your day in court kind of issues, as Member Stein was alluding to. So that might be a more fair way of getting full input. And then, we form it, it does its chore, and then it's dissolved. I don't know. Just a thought. Trying to use something that we already have in our bylaws rather than having to add more verbiage. That's what I was trying to get to.
Like a special committee to investigate improprieties that were observed at a certain public meeting, agencies, public meetings.
Special committee dealing with public libraries. And
Chris, we're losing you. We can't hear you.
yeah. Yes. As Member Stein was saying. Correct. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Better. Yeah, much better.
Yeah, so that's just a thought. I mean, yeah, it's a nice surgical tool to have, but we have to use it correctly and wisely. And I'm with Member Stein on that as to the optics of that and how it should be done. That's it for me. So as far as the item, do we are we getting near a motion? Are we not? I don't think we're there yet.
I don't know. I mean, I'm fine with members bringing complaints, but then it's just the idea of like the whole board bringing a complaint. I just feel like maybe there are better ways to do that. And I do like the suggestion that you're making of having like a special investigatory committee to look at improprieties that were observed by, a member of the committee.
Right, and the invitees could be several departments that are doing the same things. One from each department, 3 of us, and that could be the.
But even there, I probably wouldn't have the member who brings the improprieties making any decisions on that committee.
Yeah.
That's my initial thought. I'd have to go back and, I mean, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
I wonder if, I agree, adding things into the bylaws is kind of sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes, it's necessary to consider something just a documented process, but if there's something existing there, that is the most elegant solution. So I'm wondering if even with our existing committees, is there, if there's room in any of the descriptions of our existing committees where they could hear this kind of special complaint and take it on, and knowing that, the only problem would be if one of their members was the person bringing the complaint. But for instance, if it was the complaint or the compliance amendments, they would just know that there is a slightly modified, it's just a special process, right? But I guess, that would just be going back to, if you're doing that, then the member might as well just go through the regular complaint process, right? And that kind of puts a wrench in the whole thing. I mean, I guess I'll say I'm someone who observes a lot of commission meetings, and I am on board with thinking about a way that we can address violations that we recognize in those meetings in an expedient manner, and and not put that on the back burner. And so finding a solution to do that would be really critical for that. Yeah, Member Highland.
So just what something you said kind of resonated, and this might be an elegant solution. Let's say someone on the Compliance Amendments Committee brought this case before a special subcommittee. They appeared at the subcommittee as the complainant, not a member of the subcommittee, presented their side 5 minutes, and then the department had, department presented their 5 minutes. Then we heard it just like any other complaint. That might satisfy everything. They're getting their due process. The person that brought it is not on this side of the dais. They're the complainant. They speak as a complainant only. And basically all they should really do is just present it. And this the ad hoc committee's deliberations should arrive at a violation or not, or order determination, et cetera, et cetera. And that way, the department has its day in court, has its chance for rebuttals, gets asked its questions, and honestly, the person bringing the complainant should probably just stay fairly quiet, just present the basics, and kind of take a back seat, and let the ad hoc committee do its work. Mm-hmm. And it'll be exactly the same way as members of the public are treated, exactly the same way as departments are treated in every other committee that we do. I think that's probably the most fair thing that we could do. And that might be a good question for a DCA to say, is it okay for a person to come in, for a member of the full task force to come in and present as a complainant only to an ad hoc committee? Does that work within the framework of Robert's rules of what we have here? I think it does. But Member Wolf might be able to chime in on that. But ultimately, I think a quick DCA review of that particular process might be interesting.
If I may respond to that just a moment, one of the things that not just me, but former task force members, like through the San Franciscans for Sunshine group, they've lamented this for a long time. This has been a real issue of how to deal with, something is happening or an action that has been taken, and a person feels that they were wronged during that process or the process was incorrect. There is provisions in the Brown Act that allows the district attorney or any person to actually invoke a cease and desist letter on a commission or a meeting body, a legislative body, as they like to call it, that their action would actually it'd be like a soft injunction. And they would have to explain why they did what they did, and it's actionable in court. And we've been kind of we folks out in the former task force members have been promoting this to the general public, that they have this authority and power to do that. But as a task force, there was a question is, could the task force actually do this? And I've asked our legal counsel over the years, if since this got created, if we were able to do that. They weren't quite sure whether we could actually take an action against, a city department, since we are somewhat of a city entity. Could we consider ourselves to be an interested, a quote unquote person, so to speak? And there's been no answer to something like that. So that's, in light of that, which is a pretty drastic, it doesn't require necessarily a process. It's just writing a letter saying you could, your action doesn't happen until you make a correction, or you explain how you're not in violation, or how you're in compliance. Nonetheless, so that's the reason why this question came up. Is there then some other way that the task force can take on an issue like that? And so that's kind of a little additional background.
So as a reminder, there may be additional ways we want to follow this up and engage it, but the question is agendized is focused on creating a bylaw amendment and correct procedure for an SOTF member filing a complaint. Is that, are we anywhere near the point of being able to make a motion and addressing that question, or do we need to do something else? Research? What do we need to do?
Well, I'm still questioning the framework of thinking of it as the member filing a complaint. And, you know, if we went with Member Highland's suggestion as a path for procedures here, then it wouldn't require a bylaw. It would just be, I think it wouldn't require a bylaw. I don't know. It would just be a process we agreed on if a member observes violations and would like to have them addressed. I don't know.
So in your scenario, Member Highland, the member filing the complaint, they go into the normal queue and their complaint is heard at the normal pace that anyone's is. Oh, you're on mute, Member Highland.
Yes, in as much as we would form a special ad hoc committee just to hear that one complaint, or maybe there's a couple of them, I don't know. So are they in the same queue? I think there should be the appearance that there is. But for instance, let's say we have, you know, I don't know, we have 4 or 5 complaints all stacking up for that same department, right? That have to go through the 45-day thing behind us. Should we be able to go right in our next meeting and jump on it as a body? I think we should, because that's going to create some change. You know, a lot of these documents might be time sensitive for the requesters. And by the time we do our normal queue and procedure for the 5 complaints behind us, it'll be pointless for the complainants. You know, what's the phrase we hear all the time? Justice delayed is justice denied. So, you know, could we have a quicker ad hoc committee that gets right to the heart of the matter? Why not? You know. So let me make a motion. How about I make a motion to continue this to the call of the chair, pending DCA's review of this solution for a task force member bringing a complaint against a department or member of the city body.
I'll second it. Okay.
There has been a motion, would you like to open this up to public comment at this time?
Yes.
Just quickly, Chair Neighbors, you second this motion?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Cheryl, are you ready for the public comment?
Yes, I am.
Okay, David Bilfell. My mouse froze, so I can't do some of the things I usually do on the computer. So I agree that this is not really an issue or a problem that warrants a special procedure at this time. Members of a policy body, any policy body, can seek an approval from that body for actions that are within its jurisdiction. They simply have a conflict on that item. So if a member of the Planning Commission is seeking a building permit, that can go through the planning department, and if it comes before the commission, they simply are conflicted on that approval and they step aside on that item. So if you want to address it in the context of a complaint, that's generally how it works. No special procedure. It just gets handled as a complaint from a complainant, and when that matter comes, the member is simply conflicted on that item. The task force can address issues outside the complaint context and address them directly with a city agency, board, commission, or department. As Member Highland correctly pointed out, EOT is the place to do that. When I chaired the EOT committee, I did that on a regular basis. So I would say just bring it to EOT as an agenda item. Just do it. The first sentence of 67.30C, let me call that up. The task force shall advise the Board of Supervisors and provide information to other city departments on appropriate ways in which to implement this chapter. So I think anytime you see something that you think is inappropriate and you want to inform a department about ways to comply with the ordinance, that's how you do it, EOT. I could give you, a story about a city meeting I attended yesterday that I thought did not follow procedure. It doesn't seem to me like it rises to a huge concern, and so I'm not filing a complaint about it. There are any number of things that I see. If I wanted to just file complaints all day long, I could do that. I don't do that. I don't think that's helpful. Given the backlog of complaints that the task force has right now, I don't see why you would start something new like this. I think whacking through that backlog is a much better choice right now. If you were to hear complaints filed by members of the task force ahead of those filed by members of the public, that's disparate treatment, and I think you open yourselves up to all kinds of problems there. And I guess I'm struggling to hear if there's a real example here of either a meeting practice or a public records practice that a department or agency, board, or commission is engaged in that somebody thinks is not cool, that they could cite as a real example here and not have this lengthy discussion about what seems very abstract and theoretical at this point. So I guess I can support continuing this item as well to the call of the chair with the request of the city attorney. But I'm struggling, as I think Member Stein was at the beginning, for what problem you think you're actually solving here. I'm not sure that I see a real problem that needs a new procedure. Thanks for listening.
Any additional public comment?
I don't think we have any additional public. Oh,
That is our only public commenter.
it's only public.
Our public has spoken. Discussion before or agenda or changes before we move forward. Not sure what the protocol is, but Member Wolf.
Well, I would just, I'm not voting on this, but I would just say, for the sake of having cited 6730C, what's also contained in 6730C is that the task force shall make referrals to a municipal office with enforcement power under this ordinance or under the CPRA or the Brown Act whenever it concludes any person has violated any person provisions of this ordinance or acts. So, that's a shall. And there are two shalls here. One is shall make a referral, which is an action, and another is shall advise the Board of Supervisors, and so on. So, there are two choices here. But it doesn't make less of the adjudicative powers that the task force has. I know it makes it sound like I'm trying to be punitive on this, but complaints that rise to the Sunshine Task Force are lots of times egregious and need to be dealt with I think, a stronger hand. And we have tried in the past to get folks to be more compliant, and sometimes they just don't want to, or they have a policy not to, untold or unwritten policy. So that's all I'll say.
Any changes or additions to the motion?
Cheryl, can you repeat the motion?
Moved by Member Highland, seconded by Chair Neighbors to move to continue the matter to the call of the chair pending our DCA resolution of an SOTF member bringing a complaint against a department or a member of the city body.
So at this point, we're just checking with the DCA. I think it's a good place to be.
Right. Cheryl, I just want to make sure that to what you just said, add through a special ad hoc committee to set the context. I think that's important. So checking with DCA about the appropriateness of a member of the full task force bringing a complaint against the city and being heard at a special ad hoc committee. That's the full context.
Hang on a second. Use department or member of the city body through a special ad hoc committee. Period.
Through a special SOTF ad hoc committee. I mean, the point is, would that satisfy, Robert's rules and everything else if we were to do it that way? It's just a hypothetical. And
that would be a way to investigate a complaint, to ask for accountability from a department, and to let them know we believe they're not in compliance without going through like a formal complaint process. Is that the idea?
Well, actually, since we've subsequently heard from Dave Pilpel about 6730 and the shall's already in there, I would say that this motion is mostly academic at this point. I'd still like to know whether we could do it if we ever wanted to, just to give,
Credence.
I'd just be curious, is this something that's doable? But it sounds like we already have that enforcement authority, right? That's, so
Yeah.
I could withdraw the
Seems-
motion, or we could just keep it as is and get an answer.
I mean, it does seem like what we've got on the agenda is very specific about, and this is how it was sent to me from Chair Yankee, very specific to an SOTF member filing a complaint, which is not necessarily the same thing as the SOTF taking action, right, on an observed violation. That would be a different agenda item that we could consider at a different time, perhaps, if anyone's interested. But in terms of this item right now, we may have enough information to decide right now that we do, I mean, we can do further investigation, but I haven't heard anyone wanting to amend the bylaws regarding and come up with a procedure for a SOTF member to file a complaint.
I mean, we could, I could amend this motion to, well, let's see. I mean, we can always have a second motion after this if you want to present a second motion. But I'm just curious, like, if this motion passes to continue, right, and we have a second motion that, gives a definitive end to this item, are they in conflict? I mean, really, I just want to find out from the DCA, is that something we can do, should we choose to? And if the answer is yes, then it allows a member of the task force to do exactly that. And that answers, what this item is about, right? So it kind of still stands, still has merit, I think. We can entertain a separate motion saying we don't think it's relevant because 6730, but as you said, it's slightly different. It's a member of the task force versus the task force, right? So,
Yes.
so I think my question is still valid. I think it's still relevant. I'd like to get the DCA to weigh in on whether a member of the task force could present a complaint to an ad hoc committee in this format.
Okay.
That's the question. That helps, Cheryl.
Yeah. So are you amending your original motion?
I'm just clarifying it, but the motion is the same.
All right.
Yeah, I think he said that the first time around because emphasis was on the ad hoc committee.
Right.
So I think,
It's in
yeah,
So
yeah.
could an individual of the task force use an ad hoc committee to present a complaint to the task force? That was a question for the DCA to chew on. Yeah.
Okay. So no changes to this, so I don't think we need to hear public comment. Member Wolf, is this specifically about the motion?
It was just something about what you said regarding what the agenda and what you were requested to do here today. I attended because I was interested in the question, and wasn't really prepared to bring any language or anything because I wanted to hear the discussion and be part of the discussion. So there's enough food for thought here. I might work up something, and depending upon the results from the DCA might help also. That's all.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So shall we vote?
Sure.
All right. Ms. Leger, let's vote.
Member Highland?
Aye.
Member Highland, aye. Chair Neighbors?
Aye.
Chair Neighbors, aye. Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Motion passes.
All right. So, Ms. Leger, when you're ready, if you could take us to item 6.
Item number 6, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items and pending calendar by members of the Rules Committee.
When's our next meeting?
August.
Ooh.
So I don't think our member of the public has not seen this. The Rules Committee is technically a standing committee, though it has met in the past as an ad hoc committee. But based on the amount of things that were kind of coming through with the Chair Yankee was tracking, he suggested that we go ahead and schedule a few meetings in advance. So we're meeting every other Tuesday. This every other second Tuesday. Ms. Leger, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's every second Tuesday of the month at this time on this day until the end of the year. So that would give us 4 more meetings, or maybe 3 more meetings scheduled at least through then. Is that right? Have I got the meetings right, Cheryl?
Hang on, let me just take a quick look.
August, October, December.
Yep.
This is Victor. I just want to caution that we do have a limit on the maximum number of meeting days we can have in a month, just because there's only so much that we can cover in a month. And we have an agreement with the clerk of the board on the number of meetings, or at least the number of meeting days we can have in a month. So this is just something we'll need to be aware of in the future.
So we took some, I think that member Yankee, I believe he checked this out, and that's why he suggested we meet at this specific time on this specific schedule. But definitely let us know if we are in violation or just causing problems.
Okay, so the dates are today, June 14, August 9, October 11, and December 13 of this year.
Tentatively.
Unless we run out of stuff to talk about. Okay. Other than that, any other comments, questions, future agenda items members would like to surface now?
Cheryl, can you run those dates one more time?
Yeah, hang on a second. August 9, October 11, December 13.
Thank you.
So the only issue we discussed was our calendar. If we could, hear public comment on that if there is any. We would welcome
Mr.
that.
Delpo, would you like to make public comment? You can raise your hand at this time.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
What? Shock horror.
Okay, so Ms. Leger, can you take us to number 7?
Okay. No vote on anything for item 6? Okay. Item number 7, adjournment. I have 7:52 p.m.
Is there a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
In honor of Dave Philpell, I do.
Our public.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. This is my first chair meeting.
You did well,
There were
Lori.
some doubts from Member Wolf, but fine.
Thanks, Lori.